Planning and moving about are two inseparable companions. Think about it. Hi, welcome to the County Seat. I'm Chad Booth. Now, I know you're all scratching your heads thinking, what the heck is he talking about? But ponder this. When you go anywhere, you make a plan. If you go on a vacation, you plan an itinerary. If you run errands, you plan a route. If you take a walk around the neighborhood, you at least give some thought as to how you're going to get back home. Planning is also the key ingredient to building systems of transportation. The networks of airports, rail lines, bike paths, freeways, carpool lanes, every aspect of moving about has to start with a plan. And in recent years, those plans have become much more sophisticated. And that is the topic of our program today. We start our journey today with a plan to tell you about the history of planning. Here's Rhea with the basics.
The purpose of a road is to create a path from point A to point B. Simple. However, when it comes to planning a road, you may start at point A, but you never actually get to point B. That is because point B is always changing. That may explain why we are always replanning our 20-year transportation plans every 4 years or so. Before 1960, Utah officials had never thought of the concept of long-range transportation planning. When you needed a road, you built it. Simple. But as the Wasatch Front started to grow rapidly, it became harder to plan out transportation corridors, let alone build them as the valleys of northern Utah were starting to fill in. So in the summer of 1960, the Utah Department of Transportation and the local elected officials along the Wasatch Front committed to design the first long-range transportation plan that would carry the needs of the population to 1980. By 1970, it was obvious that the 1960 plan wasn't going to work. So we adopted a new plan to take us to 1995, which needed to be redesigned by 1980. The 10th plan was adopted in 2015 to get us to 2040, and the plan to take us to 2050 should be done by next year. So why is transportation so hard to plan for? Well, for one, people don't always decide to live where you think they're going to. At one time, it was assumed that population growth was going to happen on the east side of the valleys and the west side would be agricultural. So roads were built in a north-south pattern on the east side. Growth changed and planning had to adapt. Now there are more miles of east-west traffic arteries than north-south. Similar things happened in other areas of the state. Another reason is resources. At one point, gas was cheap and abundant. Now, not so much. The idea of commuting from suburbia seemed like a good lifestyle until gas costs and traffic congestion turned it into a nightmare. Air quality has also had an impact on how we move about. Road design, car design, and improvements in public transportation have also changed how people choose to get around. When those choices change, then the planning has to change as well. Finally, there's population. Since 1960, we have been adding to our population at about the rate of 1 million every 20 years. That rate of growth is about to jump 50% between now and 2040. With this kind of growth, more of the same will not work to our best interest. More roads and more cars and more commuting will have bad consequences. Yet no one wants to be forced out of their cars. So, for it to work, we will have to find ways to make alternatives a more convenient and pleasant way to move around. And to do that, we need to keep planning. The good thing about it is that Utah has a unique system of planning that starts at the community through local governments and works up. With that effort, we're able to look at all transportation, so we can adjust the mix of bike, pedestrian infrastructure, public automated or valet travel in our forward vision of the brave new world. Perhaps even including where and how we build homes in relation to where we work and play. Chad has just the people standing by to explore these topics. For the County Seat, I'm Rhea Rossi Booth.
Look south to adventure. Look south to beauty. Look south to San Juan County. Out here, the road goes on forever, and what you'll find will change how you see the world. Climb on your OHV and discover forgotten landscapes and vistas that challenge the imagination. From Blanding and Monticello to the cliff faces of Monument Valley, we're open and ready for you to explore. San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
And we will see you next week on the County Seat.
The Utah Farm Bureau began as a collection of farmers supporting each other to raise the food we enjoy. Today, Farm Bureau membership encompasses everyone, whether ranchers, growers, or just everyday folks like you and me. Members enjoy discounts on items like vehicles and ATVs, or insurance that's very affordable. You don't have to be a farmer to join, and dues are small, but together we make a big difference in keeping our food supply local and abundant. Join Utah Farm Bureau.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We are talking about transportation planning, and the crystal ball is out on the middle of the table for our discussion. Joining us are two participants in the crystal ball. Andrew Gruber is the Executive Director of the Wasatch Front Regional Council. Brett Milburn, who's on the Regional Council and is a commissioner from Davis County. Let's talk about the legislature really changed how we fund and look and build out these organizations in the last legislative session. We have a unified plan now. How is that changing traffic planning?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is a topic that impacts every Utahn, transportation, how we get around. And it's clear as you talk to folks from other regions in the country, just how good things are here in Utah. You know, we have a really strong economy, low unemployment, and our transportation system, for the most part, is working really, really well. But we also know that we're the fastest growing state in the nation. We're going to add about 2 million more people by 2050. So you think about the impact of all of those people traveling around on our transportation systems and the impact on traffic congestion and on air quality and on our quality of life. And so with all that growth that's coming, we've got to make sure that we're all working together collaboratively to invest in our transportation system and provide choices to people for how they get around.
Well, I think that's a really important part is this choice part.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of talk about forcing people out of their cars, and that seems downright un-American. But if you can make it appealing enough to get out of your car and find a different way to get to work, and it's reliable enough, I think people would voluntarily migrate without necessarily being forced to sell their car and walk everywhere.
I think it actually goes beyond just, getting somebody out of their car for getting out of your car's sake. There's so many other aspects that come into play when we're talking transportation planning. It's beyond just the roadway or the trailway or the transit line. It delves into our economic development, or the infrastructure that's put in place helps drive the direction of economic development. And then it goes even beyond that into quality of life, in particular housing, and where people are living and how people want to live anymore is a driving factor in the conversation.
Do you think that as congestion grows, and not all of this growth is going to come to the Wasatch Front that we're anticipating, and I guess it should be pointed that people think of transportation, they usually just think of the Wasatch Front, the I-15 corridor, and all the traffic reports. And you talk to a guy from Garfield and he's afraid of Salt Lake County. But it really is more than that, because traffic congestion is already existing in other parts of the state. How many MOS groups do we have?
So the Metropolitan Planning Organizations,
Yeah.
the MPOs,
MPOs,
there are 4 of them in Utah. So there's the Wasatch Front Regional Council, and that's on in Salt Lake County, Davis, Weber, and Box Elder. There's the Mountain Land Association of Governments in Utah County, and then there's the Cache Valley MPO and the Dixie Area MPO down in St. George. And so in those areas where there's more population that's concentrated, you've got these organizations that bring together mainly the local elected officials, the county officials and the mayors, to work in conjunction with UDOT and then the transit agencies to figure out what are the most important plans and investments to be made. And as Commissioner Milburn said, we do that and coordinate transportation with where are people going to live, where's the housing growth occurring, where are the jobs springing up, and can we coordinate all of those things together to be as efficient as possible. But as you noted, it's certainly not only an urban issue. There are huge transportation needs in all areas of our state. There may not be as much transit service in the rural areas of the state, but people are typically traveling longer distances. And one of the things that we know all across the state is that we have to be investing to keep our road systems and our transit and trail systems in good shape so that they're safe.
State of good repair.
Yeah,
That's right. Utah has done a good job of staying ahead of this curve, of investing in our transportation systems. But particularly at the local level, there's challenges for cities and counties to keep up. And so this is a conversation that has to keep happening.
How do you divide the money? Because to the guys in San Juan County, staying on top of that road or getting that northwest corridor taken care of in Washington County, to those people are going to be as important or more important than the big pressure in Utah County and Salt Lake County. So how does a little guy make sure that his interests are protected when you're prioritizing?
Well, I think that's a big challenge, but there are formulas that are put into place on the different revenue streams that are being tapped, particularly the gas tax, and there's a split between what comes to the state and then what goes to the locals, and there's a formula by which that is distributed, and that's being looked at and modified when necessary. There's also a process by application for these funds and certain criteria that needs to be met to fund a project. And I think even more importantly anymore is the willingness and the capacity of even the local level to participate in some of these projects to really move them forward. And that's why things such as Proposition 1 play a vital role in those opportunities to generate some funds that stay locally.
You know, another area that we need to keep looking at is public-private partnerships. How can the private sector be involved in investing in our transportation system? And like Commissioner Milburn noted a little bit ago, if we invest in our infrastructure, that helps the economy to function. So if a business is going to be looking at where do they locate? You know, we do a great job bringing businesses in from out of state. Well, they think, how can I locate somewhere where I'm going to have good access to customers, where I'm going to have good access to workers? Well, if we have good transportation systems, that helps the economy thrive and helps businesses thrive. Well, so then there's an incentive for the private sector to be involved in helping to make sure that our transportation system functions well. This is, I think, an area that we're going to be looking at more and more as time goes on.
As you go through this planning process, you do these nice plans and you think, okay, well, people are going to grow here, and then they don't. Then what do you do? I mean, has that happened? Have you guys witnessed that in your time?
I think that's happened, and I think maybe something to consider as a plan is only as good as how it's implemented. And this is where it gets right back to our local communities oftentimes and their zoning and things of that nature. We can have a plan and we can kind of envision where things are going to go, but if at the local level we don't stick to our zoning that allows to growth within that plan structure, then we do get kind of a sprawl and whatnot. So,
and you know, picking up on that, you mentioned, Chad, a few minutes ago, the action that the legislature took. there was a significant change made in the way that we are investing in our transportation system. SB 136, which is Representative Schultz and Senator Harper as the co-sponsors, made a fundamental change to the way we're thinking about transportation. So we've had these plans. Utah is nationally known for having the unified transportation plan that looks out decades into the future. And for the viewers of the show, all the information about the plan is available at unifiedplan.org. But then the question becomes, are the dollars actually following what the plan says? And are the local governments and the private landowners, are they coordinating to move forward and implement the plans? Well, Senate Bill 136, for the first time, says to the state, when the state is making its investments, when UDOT is making its decisions about how to invest millions of dollars all around the state, they need to be thinking about local land use and how that land use coordinates with transportation. They also need to be thinking about economic development. What kind of investments can be made in the urban areas and in the rural areas to bring economic development to our state and coordinate that transportation infrastructure?
As you are doing these long-range plannings, are you doing a chicken and egg thing, saying, well, we've got to improve some of that east-west traffic around the Beaver area so that they can have the kind of economic development that they can exploit the energy possibilities that they have? And so is that going into this kind of planning? Is it that detailed?
Absolutely. Yeah, those are the mindsets by which we're all operating. It can't be linear in thinking anymore. And when I say linear, not just the roadway or the transit line or the trail, but just even aspects that come into play here. We've talked about economic development, we've talked about housing, we've talked about other things that all come into play on putting that plan together.
You know, and I agree with this. You say chicken and egg, and it's a great analogy because all of the decisions around transportation, around economic development, housing, air quality, all have to be thought of at the same time. We have to link those decisions. And that's why it's also so important for local communities, including county officials and county staff, city and other, to be really involved in this transportation process. You can't just leave it to the transportation folks. Just like the housing folks have to be involved at the same time, everybody working together, all the stakeholders, to say, what's the vision for our community? How do we want to grow? And then what's the transportation system, the housing mix, to bring in that strong economic development?
Okay, I got one question for you, a quick answer. How long have you been doing this on transportation?
About the last 12 years.
Okay. How long have you been working on it?
Well, in Utah since 2010, but about 25 years total.
Okay. So in transportation, 20 years ago or 12 years ago, what has surprised you in transportation that you weren't thinking of that happened?
You can never predict accurately what's going to happen with technology, right? And I'll tell you, my teenage son, 16 years old, it used to be a rite of passage to get a driver's license. Now he says, I'm good, Dad, I'll take Uber. He does not really interested in getting a driver's license. It's more convenient for him. So there's more opportunities for people to use technology and have choices for how to get around. And we know that there's so many changes that are coming, but we don't know exactly what those changes are going to be. We've got to try to design our systems to be able to be responsive and take advantage of those innovations.
I think I would agree with Andrew there on the technology aspect and trying to keep pace with it. But I think the other thing that has maybe surprised me somewhat is just how fast our population has grown and the interest in being in Utah and our own internal growth. It's like on hyperspeed.
Yeah, it is. It's at least a 50% growth rate over what we currently have, which is already high. Gentlemen, thank you for taking the time. I hope this opens the window. When we come back to the county seat, we are going to take a look at short-term planning and find out how you participate in it on a daily basis and how they get all that information for those radio broadcasts. We'll be right back on the county seat. Thank you.
There's more to life than the 9 to 5. There's more to experience than rush hour traffic. And there's more to see than the view from your window. In Davis County, we have over 500 miles of trails to satisfy the most avid bikers and hikers, taking you beyond the ordinary and into a natural world. Pick up your free Trails and Bikeways maps at any bike shop or city office in Davis County and discover what you've been missing. Davis County, Utah. Eat, stay, play. Learn more at playindavis.com.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
Too often we find ourselves in shoes like these, or these. Wouldn't it be nice to change into something more like this, or this? How about these? Put on whatever shoes you prefer and come to Beaver County. We have exactly the adventure you need to put under them. So the next time you want to change out of these, come to Beaver County where you can jump into a pair of these. Beaver County, Utah. Lace up for adventure.
Welcome back to the county seat. One of the things included in our previous transportation plans brought about the creation of the Utah Department of Transportation Traffic Operations Center. It was felt that part of keeping traffic moving was informing the public of when it was not, giving people the chance to plan an alternative route to ease congestion. It is an impressive sight to see, as you will find out today on the ground.
Our goal to keep Utah moving, and part of that is our traffic management program and process.
We're here in our control room at the Traffic Operations Center, and here our operators can respond to any situation that happens on our road to better manage traffic. It really is the heart of UDOT.
We're able to communicate with 20 different agencies throughout the state. That helps us identify, locate, and respond to incidences, be it a crash, lane closures, or congestion. When we get an incident called in through any one of the dispatches, be it Utah Highway Patrol, sheriff, or local organization, we'll begin looking for the incident on camera. Once the operators are able to locate the call, they will find it on camera, place it on the wall for the rest of the operators, as well as Utah Highway Patrol dispatch upstairs to see. What this does is give Utah Highway Patrol or any of the first responders an action plan as to how to access the incident. We're also able to communicate with the signals statewide. Right now we've got about 96% connectivity with our signals, so if we have a crash that we're responding to in the AM peak, our signal techs are able to assist our incident management vehicles in getting traffic off the on-ramps or off the exits and on the on-ramps in a better time to avoid delay. We have over 1,200 traffic cameras that we're able to access. All of those are in live time. Some of them are accessed through a video connection system. Others are accessed through a web or an IP address.
We need to make sure that we're keeping up with the need and the demand that we're seeing here in the state. As more businesses, as more people move into the state, that means more people out on our roads as well. And so it's important to make smart decisions to address that growth.
I see the future of traffic management in Utah moving towards more connectivity, not only with vehicles, but UDOT with other dispatch centers, UDOT working with other data collectors, and everything tying in a lot more as far as autonomous vehicles, autonomous systems, our own operators being able to react in real time much faster.
Our job is really to plan for the future of transportation, and there are some challenges and opportunities with that because we are going to see so much growth happen in the next upcoming decades. We're already seeing that growth right now, and that's going to continue over the next 30, 35 years. Utah's population is going to double, and so we need to make smart decisions and have an eye on the future to make sure that we're ready for all of that additional growth.
We'll be right back with some closing thoughts.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Welcome back to the county seat. What was your takeaway from today's conversation? Was it the need to change our patterns of living and moving as a society, or thinking outside the box to usher in new technology or to solve our problems of congestion? One could connect the dots of forcing redistribution and pushing future growth into our rural communities, kind of like China's Cultural Revolution, where the government relocated millions of people out of the cities and into the rural areas. My personal thoughts are that whatever we do, it has to be market-oriented. It has to be changes in transportation that people want to engage in, things that make their lives easier and better rather than forced upon them. I think there's great promise in the idea of blending transportation to make it spontaneous, user-friendly, and round-the-clock, which can be built on a backbone of public transportation augmented with market-driven valet services like Uber, Lyft, or self-service bike rentals. This allows us to keep our freedom and our cars, but makes it more pleasurable to use other systems to get around. That's my 2 cents worth for the day. Hope you've enjoyed this topic, and we hope that you will share it with your friends on social media. In fact, would you do us a big favor and follow us on Facebook and YouTube? That way we can interact and you can keep up to date on things that happen during the week. See you next week on the County Seat.